that's a good start, and I do mean that in a most practical manner. If you don't know what to do, you could start by stopping doing all the stupid things that you're doing that you know are stupid. And that's a good start because it starts to clear your vision, right? So if you don't know what to do, but you do know that you're doing things that you're ashamed of and that you regret, you could start by just eliminating it one by one and slowly even it to the best of your ability. And then so that's really a matter of starting to become disciplined, to follow some ethical rules, some set of ethical rules. With any luck, if you follow a set of ethical rules long enough, then you'll get disciplined enough so you'll start to have a clearer vision, and then you might be able to see the way forward more. You might see a way forward more intently rather than merely what you should avoid. So that's a good initial practical issue. Because everyone knows, you know perfectly well, that there are things you're doing that you know you shouldn't do, but you don't stop. Well, you start stopping, and that's part of this idea about putting your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Because there's a question that's always open, and I suppose this is the question, so to speak, that God placed in front of Cain. It's like, well, how do you know the world would be a terrible place if you weren't such a wretched thing? Maybe it wouldn't be. And you might say, well, that's a pretty casual answer. What do you say to people who has a parent who's dying of Alzheimer's disease, for example? It's like, well, they're going to get their act together and it's going to fix that? It's like, it'll make it a hell of a lot better than it would be otherwise, I can tell you that. And that's something. Because it's bad enough to have someone who's deadly ill in your family without having an incredible amount of unnecessary pathology gather around that and make something that could be merely tragic into something that's outright hell. And that happens to people all the time. And so, even if it's not the perfect solution, it's the best solution that you have. And then the next part of that is, when I suggest to people that they do the future authoring program, and they're leery about doing it, I ask them to do it badly, because a bad plan is way better than no plan. Because if you implement a bad plan, then you'll learn why it's a bad plan, exactly, not hypothetically, but exactly in the world, and then you can use that information about your failure to retool a better plan. And so, to begin with, like, imagine you're tracking a destination that's moving, that's some kind of ideal, and your vision is blurry, you don't know where to look, and so you're going to go this way, and then you're going to go that way, and then you're going to go this way. But if you keep doing that, then the deviations from the right path are going to decrease with time, and eventually you'll be walking forward in an efficient manner. And you might have to make all sorts of errors before you manage that. But I've watched people long enough in my clinical practice to know that waiting for Godot is a very bad idea. And not growing up is a very bad idea. It's like, implement the best plan you have at hand. And learn from it. And that works. And you get sharper at making your plans. And then the other thing that we do in the future authoring program is we ask people, well, maybe you can't decide what your passion or your calling should be. That's a pretty global question. But you might ask yourself sub-questions like, well, is there something you can do to improve your intimate relationship? One thing, is there a way that you can improve your friendships? Is there something you can do at your job that would make it better than it is now, even if it's something incremental? Could you do something more productive and meaningful with your time outside of work? Could you be slightly better at handling temptations that come your way? Could you take care of yourself somewhat better mentally and physically? And the answer to all of those questions is generally yes. And then you could even ask yourself a simpler question, which would be, well, if there is something that you could do that would make one of those things better, is there also something that you would do? And you can ask yourself that, instead of telling yourself that you should, which isn't the same thing. You might say, well, I would like my marriage to be better. You ask yourself, well, how could my marriage be better? And you'll get a bunch of answers, and most of them you won't like. Because if you really ask yourself a question like that, the part of your brain that's imaginative and that's looking for new answers will tell you, and it'll tell you a bunch of things you don't want to hear. And a lot of them will be things you already know. And some of them will be things that there's just no damn way you'll do, even though you know that you should. But some subset of those might be things that you should do, that by your own definition, that you actually would do. They might be trivial things, or look trivial, but at least they're a step in the right direction. So take whatever step in the right direction you're willing to take, day by day. And that's incremental progress. And it'll spiral upward. It does spiral upward. There's a statement in the New Testament, which actually happens to be a true statement, which is, to those who have everything, more will be given. And it's a reflection of an underlying phenomenon that looks like a natural law, which means that as things start to accrue to you, the rate at which they will further accrue will increase. That's a natural law. It's called Price's law sometimes, or Pareto. It's reflected in the Pareto distribution. So there's a chapter in 12 Rules for Life called Don't Compare Yourself. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And it's an injunction for incremental improvement. If you don't know where to go in your life, well, think about where you are and see if today you can make where you are somewhat better on some dimension. So that when you go to bed at night, you're not as wretched as you were when you woke up in the morning. And so if you do that for 2 years, one thing a day, just a small thing, something you could actually do that you would do, then your life will be way better. And at the end of that, you might have enough clarity of mind to start to understand where you could go if things worked out for you properly in the world. So that's the answer to that question. All right, so here's another way that you figure out how to act in the world. Let's say you're a child, and there's a lot you don't know, almost everything. So how do you handle that? Well, you stay in a simplified environment, right? You don't crawl out onto the street when you're 10 months old. Your parents aren't going to let you do that. They keep you in a bounded environment, and they keep you close to them. And what you do is you act out what you know, which isn't very much. Mostly it's how to put things in your mouth and investigate them, because that's what kids do. And to smile and to interact and to play a little bit. But it's a fragile space of knowledge, and it's easily disrupted. And when it's disrupted, you cry, and that's a signal of the disruption. And then your parents move in with their greater knowledge, and they fix whatever the problem is. And what you do is you watch them, and then you imitate them. It's not like you know what they're up to because you're not sophisticated enough to know what they're up to. No child can give a full account of the behavior of their parents. No parent can give a full account of their own behavior. So you certainly can't expect that from a child. But children obviously grow up to take care of their own children, just like animals grow up to take care of their own offspring, right? Without ever knowing what they're doing exactly. So you learn by imitation. Now what that means is that collectively, we faced things that we didn't understand for a very, very long period of time, and we figured out how to act so that it works. But we don't know the rules that underlie that exactly. We don't know exactly what that means. We just figured it out. So there's a way of being a good father, let's say, and there's a way of being a good mother. And mostly you understand what that is when you fail at it, or when your child accuses you of failing at it. Right? Because it's only in the failure that you realize that you've deviated from whatever the ideal is. Because you're not, who the hell knows what the rules are for being a good father? It's very difficult to detail them. But you know when you've failed. Okay, so you know how to be a good father. And you know that because you imitated your father, and he imitated his father, and he imitated his father, and it's like way back, as far as you can possibly go, that's the rule. We also know that, and here's an example of why. I have a colleague at the University of Toronto who studies maternal behavior in rats. And rats are actually very sophisticated, and they have somewhat of a culture which they pass on through imitative learning. If you take rat pups away from